Good evening. I will call this meeting of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee to order.
Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee to order.
We have a wonderful echo. Today is Tuesday, December 20th. We are here at the council chambers of City Hall. Second item of business is to identify any potential conflicts of interest. With the agenda before you, does anybody wish to declare or discuss any potential conflicts of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens wishing to comment? Any citizens' comments? Got a room full of staff, but no citizens. No citizens' comments. One more time. Any citizens' comments? All right, we'll move on to number 4, consent agenda. We have the minutes of the December 6, 2022 meeting. We have the bills and payroll, and we have the report of personnel actions. What's your pleasure? We have a motion to approve by Mr. Wagner, a second by Mrs. Tompkins. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Nothing was pulled, so we'll skip number 5. Number 6, request to recommend council approval of both budget resolution number 13-2022 and budget resolution number 01-2023, mechanical repair work on engine number 2, and this is presented by Everett Mueller, Deputy Fire Chief of Fire Prevention. Deputy Chief.
Good evening. How are you this evening?
Good.
Good. Would like to present this. Thank you for the opportunity to present the problems we're experiencing with engine 2. Each year, every apparatus with a pump has a pump test conducted on it per an FAA 1911, which is a standard for fire inspection, maintenance, and testing for fire apparatus. The pump test puts the pump under maximum pressure and load to ensure the pump is capable of pumping at an emergency. It must be completed by a certified third-party vendor, and our third-party vendor was Red Power Diesel. During the 2022 pump test, a major problem was found with the pump transmission. The pump test found that there was a bad bearing in the pump transmission. The pump transmission and the pump are considered to be the center section of that apparatus. That makes it kind of a unique situation, as they need to be physically removed from the apparatus in order to get the pump transmission, as they are on a single shaft that extends through both units. So that means that whole center section has to be tore apart and disassembled. We did accrue some costs up to this point, $8,836.90 for the work that has been completed to diagnose the problem. At that point, we got to the part where they were able to inspect that area and find that there was a blown bearing in there. We told them to stop work because at that point we had already accrued some cost and we knew there was going to be more cost. We dug into it and we had them produce 3 options for us. The one option that I feel is probably the best option, and one that I would recommend for this council to, or the Finance, Budget, and Personnel to approve and move on to Common Council. And that would be the repair. It would be basically pulling the center section and replacing the pump and pump transmission. This repair right here would give us a 6-year warranty. There's 10 years left, which is a 2033 is when we're looking to replace that apparatus. That would give us 6 years of the 10-year period would be under a warranty. If we go with the other 2 options that I had displayed in the packet, those options would not have a warranty or would have very little warranty, which would be a 1-year warranty just on the pump transmission alone. If we went down that road with just the pump transmission alone, we would still be on the hook for pulling the entire pump and the entire pump transmission if something were to happen. We have a 14-year-old pump on that truck as well, and that's where basically the whole apparatus is 14 years old. So if we were to pull those 2 pieces together, we feel that this is the best one. It's a fixed cost, whereas each of the other options would accrue additional costs with 1 year or no warranty at all. Engine 2 has a 10-year service life, which we talked about. And I guess at this point, the department's requesting approval of Budget Resolution 13-2022 for the amount of $8,837, which are the current charges with Red Power Diesel. And then Budget Resolution 01-2023 for the amount of $45,160, which is option 3, replacement of the pump and pump transmission. That pretty much wraps up what I have to present. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Much pleasure. I have a motion from Mr. Hendler to approve. I have a second from Mrs. Tompkins. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, we'll take action on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 7.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Number 7, request to recommend council approval to change part-time adult services position in the library to full-time. Presented by Jill Porter, Library Director.
Thank you. During the last finance, budget, and personnel meeting, Councilman Wagner asked me what the library intended to do with its continuing appropriation funds. And I answered that we planned on using those funds to make pay adjustments in 2023 and to continue reevaluating staffing needs based on some long-range plans we have. And I am in front of you this evening to seek your approval to make one such adjustment to our staff structure. As outlined in my memo, I would like to change part-time position in adult services to full-time. This change was originally intended to provide assistance to our part-time marketing person and to assist with programs in youth, teen, and adult services. Unfortunately, we no longer have that marketing person because she resigned to take another job. And we also elected not to fill that position due to the budget cuts. So in light of these circumstances, it's more important than ever that we get this part-time position changed to full-time. We won't be any further ahead regarding staffing needs, but we will be able to maintain a level of service that the public expects from us. As noted in my memo, the increased costs for this position were included in the 2023 budget and will be partially covered by some of the continuing appropriation funds. The position was reconfirmed by the library board at its meeting last week. So unless you have any questions for me, I would seek your approval on this position change.
Mr. Hendler has a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wagner. Questions, discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Number 8, request to recommend council approval to refill vacant payroll / accounts payable technician position, presented by Jennifer Selensky, Finance Director. Jennifer.
Good evening. Our current payroll associate technician, Bob Schuley, has submitted his resignation to the city, and his last working day is expected to be in mid-January. While we do appreciate all Bob's accomplishments over the 14 years that he has worked for the city, this is a critical position, and we are seeking to refill that vacancy and any subsequent vacancies that may be created within our department should an employee switch roles. So what we have done with the job description that is included in your packet is we have combined the duties back into one job description of AP and payroll. Earlier this year, we had tried to segregate those duties, and it really didn't work out with cross-training and having two separate job descriptions. It's the same pay scale. And it leaves us vulnerable when one person leaves, if both persons fulfilling the AP and the payroll role are not equally trained and capable of doing both job duties. So with that, staff recommends that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommend to Council authorization to begin the process of refilling the vacant payroll AP technician and any subsequent vacancies that may occur as a result of filling that position.
It's a pleasure. Mrs. Tompkins, you have a motion to approve. Okay, motion by Mrs. Tompkins. Second by Mr. Hendler. Questions, discussion? Seeing none, we'll take action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Number 9, request to recommend council approval of resolution number 2022-50, continuing appropriations 2023, step 1, presented by Jennifer Selensky, Finance Director. Jennifer.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, we saw a very similar resolution for some items for IT training and the library's statutory allowance for a carry forward. After that time, the fire department has identified some expenditures that are already in flight, but will not be the good or service will not be received in 2022, but will be received in 2023 based on delivery times and what other delays that may occur. So with that, staff is recommending approval of resolution number 2022-50 to commit fund balance in the amount of $43,159 within the general fund for continuing appropriations.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Wagner to approve. Second by Mrs. Tompkins. Questions, discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
is this, there's a certain amount of money that we've earmarked or knowing going back into Treasury to be thrown against next year's budget. Well, we're only affecting this by how much? 45,000?
Just under, correct.
Under 45,000. Okay, that's not going to mess up the budgeting that we've already done.
No, these items were budgeted in 2022, but were not spent, so that if we left it alone, it would fall to fund balance. But because they will actually be receiving these goods in 2023, which we did not budget for, we have to bring this budget forward so we aren't over budget in 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll take action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 10, request to recommend council approval to extend the city's current agreement with SEH Incorporated for planning services through March 31st, 2023, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator. Mr. Barg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we had the resignation of Stephen Wiley as our city planner back in middle part of October. And I think you all know that we've been struggling to fill vacancies in the Development Services Department. So at that point, we really had a critical situation to deal with. We were very fortunate to get Bryce Hembrook by consulting or contracting, I should say, with SEH Incorporated. Bryce knows us well. He worked for the city for 4 years in that department and is very familiar with our operation. So we did sign on to a contract in late October. The contract really calls for $135 an hour for Bryce's services, expected to be 8 to 10 hours per week. But we did go with a cap of $15,000 for that roughly 10-week period in case there was an overage. We're not obligated to pay $15,000 through December 31st. It looks like it'll be less than that. But just in case there was an overage, we'd be covered, kind of a retainer type thing. So what we're looking at here is going from January 1st to March 31st. We would love to have planning staff on board before the end of the first quarter of 2023. But, and if we do, we can certainly ask Bryce to step aside. But at this point, that seems unlikely. Certainly most of that time period, we expect to need his services. And he's done a wonderful job for us because of his familiarity with the city. The only change in the contract from the one that you approved back in October of 2022 is that one provision. Instead of $15,000 as a cap, it would be $20,000 from January 1st to March 31st. But again, all we're going to pay is the hourly rate that we accumulate with his services during that 13-week period. So with that in mind, I would recommend approval of the agreement for January 1st through March 31st of 2023 with SEH Incorporated for planning-related services.
What's your pleasure?
Can we ask a question?
Without any
Motion on the floor.
motion on the table, I guess we need to
I'll
start
tell you
asking
what,
some questions. So go ahead,
To
Mrs. Tompkins.
facilitate the discussion, I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Wagner, a second by Mr. Hendler. Mrs. Tompkins.
Mr. Barg, was the original contract for 10 weeks and this one is for 12, or is it the same amount of time?
It's really not based on weeks. It's based upon, the end of the fourth quarter versus the end of the first quarter of 2023. So it turns out if you look at the calendar, the first one we did at the end of 2022 was 10 weeks till the end of December. This one, having 2 31-day months in January and March will be 13 weeks, but it's based upon the calendar, not the number of weeks.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Wagner.
I'd like to ask Steve. Steve, can you highlight or capsulize any discussions you've had with the Regional Planning Commission about what services we can get from them for free?
Well, I've talked to them a little bit, not real recently. The last time I talked to them, they made it pretty clear that they're struggling to find planning staff in their own agency. They've been down one for quite a while, kind of like we were, if you think back to Emmett and Josh. I haven't talked with them too recently. I do know that the market doesn't seem to be getting a whole lot better. I checked when you asked me to do that before. I can certainly check tomorrow and Thursday and see if things have gotten better, because I do respect North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. I just assumed that we would probably continue with Bryce doing the job that he's doing now, because again of his familiarity with us. But I'm willing to check into it the same way I did the first time, to see if they really do have staff available now, as opposed to being deficient themselves.
It's not so much what staff do they have available now, as what would they be able to offer us under a contract? That's what I'm more interested in. Could they take care of some of the day-to-day stuff?
Well, yeah, and again, I'm willing to check that out for you. I guess and I don't mean to be too cozy with one provider of the service, but the fact of having Bryce, who worked for us for 4 years, when I hear about his conversations with Natalie, front staff, other people in the department from the building inspection side, and with me, quite frankly, twice a week. I mean, he's very familiar with the zoning code, the subdivision code, all the things that we do, the sign code, in ways that somebody else would have to get up to speed on. But then I didn't expect to be sitting here talking about contract number 2 either when we started down this path.
Any other questions? I guess I'm curious if SEH is our best option, or if we've looked at Cedar at all, Cedar Corporation.
Yeah, I know that was mentioned after the conference when a couple of council members ran into Josh at the conference, and they certainly do have services to offer. Again, whether it be North Central or whether it be Cedar, you direct me and I'll look and see what they have to offer. Certainly Josh Miller knows us very well. He's in a position that I think he travels quite a bit from what I understand for his job, so I'm not sure what his availability is for meetings and stuff, although Bryce does most of what he does remotely as well. But I'll take your direction on this. I feel like SDH is a good place to land for a while longer, but again, this is the body giving direction.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, it's not so much that there's anything against SEH. As a matter of fact, I don't think most of the council is aware of it, but we're undergoing our airport master plan, and the engineering is being done by an engineering firm, but the grant application to the FAA is being done by SEH. So I don't have anything against them. It's just a matter of they are not cheap. So anyway, and when someone mentions free services to us, my ears perk up a lot. So
that's a good point, and I think I'm sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead, Mr. Barger.
Okay, thank you. I think that Cedar is relatively close in price, although again, Josh Miller, if he would be the person working with us, knows us for 12 years. North Central, you're right. I mean, that would be a service that would not cost us much of anything if they were able to provide it. I honestly haven't checked in the last few weeks to see if anything's getting better. My understanding from Bryce and many other people that I know from other cities, is that finding planning staff at this point, for some reason, more than HR staff, more than finance staff, more than anybody, seems to be at kind of a crossroads where nobody is able to land people to fill those positions. So I can check in with both of them and let you know, and report back to you if you want to wait till the next meeting. I know the contract period is supposed to start on January 1st, but the other thing I want to throw in too, as a sort of coming attractions for the council meeting, I'm sure you've seen that, is that I've got in their request to appoint this team of staff and elected officials to look at the structure of that department along with the overall org chart. So right after the first of the year, and I mean right after the first of the year, that will be absolute number one.
I guess my interest in Cedar was, I believe that they are cheaper, and I believe that Josh could provide a lot of services in person rather than having to be remote. Mrs. Spiros, did you have something? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we will go ahead and take action on the motion, which is to approve this contract. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nay. Passes 4-1.
Can I get some clarification? Was that just flat out, or was that with some contact with these others? And it doesn't sound like coming back. But what was the intent?
Well, I believe when council approves this action that we're sending to them for tonight, it would be a contract, but I think Mr. Wagner's desire to see if we can get some free services is still on the table. I just think that my interest in Cedar is probably.
Excuse me. Yeah, and that's, I don't think there's anything in there that says that SEH would be the exclusive provider of services. I mean, we could, if North Central had some, if they wanted to redo some zoning codes for us or work on some other code enforcement issues, and we thought it was, if we found out it would be either free or almost free for them to do that, I would like to think that the contract with SEH would not interfere with us being able to do that. Does that help?
Okay, what I'll do tomorrow is it does, Ed. What I'll do tomorrow is I'll follow up first with Dennis at North Central and then with Josh at Cedar.
And I think from North Central, it's what can they provide, not what's their staffing situation.
Yeah.
All right, that's done.
Okay.
And that passed, as I said, 4-1. Number 11, request to recommend council approval of policy number 3.8003A, wage scale increase to all new employees, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think many of you remember the conversation on December 6th. It was a long and winding road as we talked about maybe changing the policy for when the step increase eligibility would be for new hires or newly promoted people who come on board to those positions between January 1st and June 30th. And at the end of the day, it seemed like there was support for what Sarah and I were bringing forth, which was April 1st as a cutoff, kind of a compromise with no particular factual basis. It just seemed like maybe a good place to land, that you shouldn't have to wait more than 15 months to be eligible for that first step increase. But in talking with Sarah afterwards, we kind of feel like maybe it's best to step aside. We want to talk about some other things as we get into 2023 about the personnel policy as it relates to compensation anyway. Maybe just take this one off the table and leave it to be what the policy was prior to 2022, when I kind of stepped in waters I didn't intend to, and go with what's on the books, and have that other conversation maybe sometime in February or March or whenever, along with other compensation related items. But at the meeting, Chairman Witzel had a great idea, and I think we all felt it when he said it. As far as the eligibility for the general wage increase given to all non-represented employees on July 1st, and it never had dawned on me until that point that if you started, I'll just take a position of equipment operator since we have more than one. If you started as an equipment operator on April 1st, you wouldn't be eligible for the 6-month raise given to all city employees until October 1st. So you'd still potentially be at step 1 of your pay scale, and yet a new equipment operator hired on July 10th would start above that person at the new revised upgraded step 1 of that pay scale. And that is ludicrous to say the least. So great identification of that, Tom, I really appreciate it. So all that you have in front of you tonight is to recommend to the council that we make a slight change to policy 3.800 to make it painfully clear that all employees, all non-represented employees, would be eligible for the general wage increase on July 1st, regardless of when they were hired or promoted to the current position. And I would make that recommendation that the committee accept that and forward that on to the council for final action.
So just to clarify for everybody, we are not looking at changing when they're eligible for step increases. We're just simply changing the wording for the general wage increase, which is in that section under 3 procedures, A, new hires, second paragraph. What's your pleasure?
I move to approve and send on to council for approval.
All right, I have a motion by Mrs. Tompkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Wagner. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Request to recommend council approval of 2023 partnership agreement for operation of the Marshfield Job Center, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator. Steve.
Thank you very much. Well, I think those of you who have been around for a while know that we've had an ongoing relationship with North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. It also extends to the Department of Workforce Development from the state They have not provided funding like the city and North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board, but they have provided technical assistance, internet, phone, and those types of things to facilitate the operation. I think Council President Wagner knows that this has been a very good arrangement over the years. The city pays roughly 75% of the cost of the part-time staff person who works at the center. They work 3 days a week, 6 hours a day, so it's an 18-hour job. And they work, as we know, over at the 2nd Street Community Center and have for the last few years. It's been a good arrangement. You may recall that in the budget process for 2023, we were looking at eliminating funding to all the non-government agencies. I pulled this one off of that list that you approved because we have an ongoing lease with the North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board that runs into 2024. So, cutting their funding would have seemed highly inappropriate, to say the least. So this agreement that's before you for 2023 is really almost identical to the one from last year. I think there might have been a couple of wording changes, but it's the same thing. City would pay $12,500 toward the part-time staff person. North Central would pay $4,500. And again, the Department of Workforce Development would pay some ancillary costs related to technology and those types of things. So I would recommend that the committee recommend council approval to authorize me to execute the 2023 partnership agreement on behalf of the city.
It's a pleasure.
I move to approve and send on to council for approval.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tompkins to send on to council.
Did Mrs. Spiros just? I'll second it if Mrs. Spiros didn't. She did.
Did you second it, Mrs. Spiros?
I did not, but it's fine.
Second by Mr. Wagner. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 13, suggested items for future agendas. Seeing none and seeing no further business before this committee, I declare this meeting adjourned.